In the last session, we have started with security model, where we discussed how to create a user. Let's again quickly go through it, and then we will discuss about profile. So to create a user, you can search for users in the quick find search box. Under users section, we have users link. Click on this. And then to create new user, click on new user button. Then we will have to fill in all this information: role, user license, and profile. These three are the important fields or parameters while creating user. So creating user is nothing but creating a record only, the way you create account, contact, or opportunity record. Same way, we have standard user object under which you are creating one record. Just that after creating user record, it allows an employee to log into Salesforce application with username and password. Okay. One more thing to make a note of is when you create a user, you are actually consuming the user license. So once you consume any user license while creating user, you cannot get back that license. So these are the few points we discussed in the last session while creating user. Now let's discuss in detail what is profile. In the last session, I mentioned profile is nothing but a subset of user license. Why? Because even though license gives you access to everything, with profile, you can manage or control the permissions of user. So out of 5 features to which license gives you access, with profile, which is under the license, you can enable only 2 to 3 permissions or 4 permissions. Any of these 5 permissions can be controlled or managed with the help of profile. So within the profile, you can actually manage all the types of permission. That is the reason it is called as set of permissions also. So all object level permissions, okay, like whether user can read the records of the object. So read permission, edit permission, delete permission, create permission. All the object level permissions can be managed under profile. Okay. Then every object has fields. So this field level permissions also can be managed under profile. We call it as field level security, FLS. So if any field of the object should not be accessible to any profile, then you can go to that field and you can make it inaccessible to any profile. Okay. Same way you can make any field as read only also for specific profiles. We are going to also practically have a look at it. Then page layout assignments can be managed under profile. Then all application permission, tab level permissions. As a part of development course, you create Apex classes, Visual Force pages. So all these permissions can be managed under profile. So we will go through one of the existing profile first. to understand what all permissions can be managed under profile, and then later on we will see how can we create our own profiles within Salesforce. So to go through the profiles, you can just simply search for profiles in quick find search box. Under users, you will find profiles link. Let's open this. So there are lots of profiles within this system. Now again, for profile also there are two types of profiles: standard profile and custom profile. We know the difference between standard and custom. Standard profile means so inbuilt profile, already existing profile within Salesforce, and they are not editable. As they are the inbuilt profiles, they are not editable, means we cannot control or manage or update the permissions under standard profile. Only few things can be managed under standard profile. That is the reason whenever you have to assign profile to a user, you should always create custom profile and assign custom profile to a user, because custom profiles are the profiles created by admin. As admin has created it, admin can anytime manage the permissions under custom profile. So let me open one of the profiles. So standard user profile. Once you open any profile, it shows the license to which this profile is associated with it, and then all the permissions start. So first one is page layout settings, where all the objects are listed down, and for every object the layout which is assigned to this profile. For an example, for account object, account object we have seen there are four layouts: sales, marketing, support, and general account layout. So for this profile, for account object, account layout is assigned, which means any user with this standard user profile, if he logs in and if he tries to access account records, for those users, the fields and the related list will be displayed based on the account layout. Similar way, if there are users from marketing department, for all those users, marketing profile will be assigned to them. And within the marketing profile, for account object, marketing page layout will be assigned, so that when marketing user logs in and tries to access account records, he will access fields on the account record based on the marketing layout. Similar way for support and all the other types. So this is how the layouts will be rendered to users based on the profile. So page layout assignments can be managed under profile. You can click on view assignment if you want to change the page layout for any object. Let's say for account object, if you want to change this page layout, you can click on view assignment. Once you click on view assignment, it shows you all the profiles and the page layout assigned to every profile. So here you can see there is one marketing profile, and to this marketing profile for account object, marketing layout is assigned. Then for most of the profiles, account layout is assigned. So accordingly, the fields and all the other details will be rendered to user. If you want to change the page layout for any of the profile, you need to click on edit assignment, and then you will be able to change the layout. Any questions? Any doubts so far?
No.
Okay, so the page layout permissions can be managed under profile. Let's scroll down. Field level security. Again, here as well, all the objects are listed down, and for every object, you can manage field level security. Let's say again for account object, you want to update the field level permissions. So you can click on the view link for account object. Once you click on view, it shows you all the fields of account object, their data type, and then the access level, read access and edit access. So let's say you want to remove the access for account side field as per the requirement. So you can click on edit, and then for account side field, if you remove read access, it will also remove edit access, because if you don't have read access, how can you edit the record? So this is how you can remove the access for any field. Once you click on save, any user with this standard user profile, when they try to access the record or update the record, they cannot see account side field on the layout. Not even the layout, but through any channel, if they try to process account record, they will not have access to account side field. Sometimes you may have a requirement where the field should be accessible to a user, but only with read access. In that case, you can just enable read access. If user needs both the accesses, you can enable both. So according to the requirement, you can manage field level security permissions under profile. And then once you make any changes to the field level security, you can click on save. So this is how you can manage field level security permissions. Any questions on this?
No.
Let's go back to the profile. Page layout permissions we discussed. Field level security we discussed. Let's scroll down. Application permissions. So here we have the app launcher where we can see few applications, and then we can also search for applications. So which app should be accessible to a user? We have lots of standard apps like sales. Here is the sales app, then service app, marketing app. So application level permissions also can be managed under profile. Which app should be accessible to a user and which app shouldn't be. That all can be controlled under profile custom app settings. Then tab level permissions, where all the object tabs and other tabs are displayed, and for every tab We have three types of settings: default on, default off, and tab hidden. Tab hidden means it's pretty much clear that the tab is hidden for user. So for awards tab, the setting is tab hidden, which means any user of this standard user profile cannot access awards tab. Default on means tab is visible, it's accessible over the tab bar. So once you open any app, all the tabs will be displayed over here, right? This is called as tab bar. Yeah, so the tab will be displayed over here. And if the tab visibility is set to default off, in that case, tab will not appear over here in the tab bar. It will be accessible over here. So here you can search for that tab, okay, and it will appear over here in the search result. So tabs for which the setting is default off, they cannot be accessed directly from here. You need to search here and then access it. So these are the tab level visibility permissions. Any questions so far?
No.
Yep. Let's move on. Now we'll scroll down a bit. There are lots of permissions within the profile, and most of the permissions we don't have to manage every day. There are lots of permissions which are default permissions, which will be same across all the profiles. So you can see few administrative permissions and lots of permissions are there, which you don't have to touch at all most of the times. So at the moment we are going through only the permissions which we need to frequently update or work on. So I'm just scrolling down, and now we have object level permissions. These are the most important permissions under profile, because you will have to always deal with this object level permissions. So as I mentioned, for object level permissions, you can manage these four permissions: read, create, edit, delete, which are called as basic access permissions. And then we have two data administration permissions: view all and modify all. So as an example here, let's say for account object, read, create, edit, and delete permission is enabled, which means any user with this standard user profile can create new account record in system, because create permission is enabled. So user can create new account. Okay. And read, edit, and delete permission is also enabled, which means user can read, update, and delete existing account records. Yeah. But while reading, updating, or deleting existing records, what all account records he can read, update, or delete, that depends on the sharing setting which we are yet to go through. Okay. This sharing setting, organization by default, and sharing rules. So by default, assume that if you are owner of the record, you can read, edit, and delete, as read, edit, and delete permission is enabled for account. Okay, which means what I'm trying to say is any user with this standard user profile can read, edit, and delete his own account record. His own records means the records for which the user is owner. But when it comes to accessing other users' account records, it will be dependent on the sharing settings. Just keep that in mind. Then we have view all and modify all permission. These permissions need to be used carefully. That is the reason you see for most of the objects they are not enabled. Only on very critical scenarios those permissions are used and enabled. View all permission. If you enable view all permission for any object, it means user of this profile can view all the records of the object for which this view all permission is enabled. View all records means read all the records of the object, irrespective of who is the owner of the record, what is the role hierarchy of the users or the owners. Irrespective of that, user will be able to read all the records of the object. For example, let's say for account only, if we have enabled view all permission, it means user of this standard user profile can read all the account records in the organization, irrespective of who is the owner of account records. So in that case, even the sharing settings doesn't matter. Irrespective of whatever is sharing setting we have, still user will be able to read all the account records in the organization. Same way we have modify all permission. With modify all permission, user will be able to read, edit, delete, and transfer ownership of all the records of the object for which modify all permission is enabled. So again, if we consider if for account object modify all permission is enabled in this profile, then all the users of this standard user profile will be able to read, edit, delete, and transfer ownership of all the account records in the organization, irrespective of the owner of the records. Here at the end, I'm mentioning transfer record or transfer ownership. Transfer ownership means changing the ownership. You can make any other user as the owner of the record. So that is called as transfer ownership. So these are the 6 types of permissions we can manage for every object. Any questions on this?
No. Quick question. Is there like a feature to like instead of do you have to create like profiles for each user, or like is there, if you have a group of users who have the same permissions, if you assign their role, then they automatically get all those permissions, like instead of having to do each user? Is that like an option within Salesforce?
Yes. So right, good question. So for all the users who need same set of permission, we can use the same profile. It is not required to create new profile for every user. Okay. So let's say if all the users belong to the same department, in that case, ideally, as they belong to same department, which means they need same set of permissions. So we can create one profile for that particular department, and we can assign that profile to all the users who belong to that department. Okay.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. So similar way for rest of the standard objects also, the permissions are enabled based on the requirements. So if you see for a campaign object, only read permission is enabled, which means any user of this standard user profile can only Read campaign record, cannot create new campaigns, cannot edit or delete any campaign. Yeah. And then if you scroll down, at the end we have custom object permission, where if you have created any custom objects, for those also same 6 uh, levels of permission: read, create, edit, delete, view all, and modify all. So let's scroll down. Next one is session setting. So you might have observed on most of the websites, when you log into any website, and if you are inactive for certain period of time, you get logged out automatically. This is because of the session settings. So your session gets expired automatically after certain period of time. Same session settings you can enable or configure within the profile. So by default it is 2 hours of inactivity, which means if any user of this profile is inactive for 2 hours, user will be logged out automatically. So this is session settings. Then password policies. Usual password policies which you observe on most of the websites, like after how many days the password will expire, then how many passwords can be remembered, what is the minimum password length, maximum password length, what is the combination of characters within the password. So all these password policies also can be managed under profile. Any questions so far?
No.
Okay. So if you are going to go for a certification, Salesforce admin certification, so you should be aware of this permissions which we can manage under profile. There can be a question saying password policies can be managed under, and the options will be on profile, on user, both of the above, none of the above. So the correct answer is you can manage password policies only on profile. Same way session settings also. Next one is login hours. Login hours is basically the working hours within the company for every day. Okay. So you can click on edit for login hours, and then for every day you can specify the time, okay, the working time. So let's say the working duration or time is 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. every day. So you can configure it like this. Let's say on Sunday, if it's a holiday, then you can just specify none. For rest of the days, you can specify the working hours like this. Now, once you specify working hours like this, then there will be restrictions while logging into Salesforce. So if you consider from Monday till Saturday for every day, the start time and end time is 9 a.m. to 6 p.m., then the user will not be able to log in before 9 a.m. and after 6 p.m. Such kind of restrictions will be there. Okay. Let's say user is working on some application at around 5:30 p.m. So user can continue to work on the same application after 6 p.m. also, but After 6 p.m., if user tries to open any other tab or application, user will be logged out automatically. So this is how there will be some restrictions when you set up login hours. That is the reason most of the companies don't set up login hours unless it's very critical or required. As per my experience, I have not seen any company configuring this. Next one is login IP ranges. So whenever you work in any company, most of the companies will be having their own private internet network. And if it's a private internet network, they will have their own set of IP ranges. It means IP is allocated for their own network. Okay. So let's say that IP range is from 0.0.0.0 to 0.0.255.255. So these are the IPs they have been allocated. So you can configure that IP range over here, as I mentioned, 0.0.0 and 0.0.255.255. Once you configure that IP range over here, then any user who wants to access this Salesforce org should be connected to company internet network only. Because when you are connected to company internet network, then only the IP within this range will be allocated to your system, and then you will be able to authenticate to Salesforce. If you are using any home network or any outside network, you will not be allowed to authenticate to Salesforce. So such IP ranges can be used by the companies who have a confidential information about customers. Okay. Like any banking system, they might have stored a lot of confidential information about customers, like credit card details, debit card details, or their bank details and all, which should not be accessible to unauthorized people. So this is where we can set login IP ranges and restrict the users to log into Salesforce from outside company internet network. Any questions?
No.
I have a question. The credit card you said, the credit card information, where is that thing here? Is the same IP, the IP range?
Credit card information will reside in any of the objects, right? Like we have account, contact. So we create contact record for customers. Then related to contact, if there is a requirement to store credit card information, maybe you can create one object within Salesforce to store credit card details. Okay. So this is called as confidential information, right? So it's a data which is confidential and you don't want that data to be leaked,
Mhm.
right?
Okay.
That is the reason. Yeah, that is the reason we can set login IP ranges so that any user cannot access Salesforce outside company network and cannot extract such information for misuse.
Okay.
Okay, so this is login IP ranges. Then, as I mentioned, as a part of developer course, if you are a developer, you can create Apex classes, Visual Force pages, and if you want to manage their permissions, those permissions also can be managed under profile. By default, whenever you create any new class or new page, they get added to all the profiles by default. Then later on, if you want to remove any of the class or Visual Force page permissions, you can just click on edit and you can remove any page or class from the profile. Okay. So class or page permissions also can be managed under profile. So these are the few important permissions which we can manage under profile. Let's go up. We will discuss two more permissions and then we'll move on with the next topic. So here we have administrative permission. Under this section there are lots of permissions. We will just discuss two out of those. Okay. Okay. So there is view all data permission. So the way on object level we have view all permission for every object. Similar to that, we have view all data permission. If you enable this view all data permission for a profile, then any user of this profile will be able to view all the data. Means user will be able to read all the records of all the objects within the organization. User can read all account records, user can read all contact records, user can read all opportunity records. Okay. Each and every object's records can be accessible by user if view all data permission is enabled. But user will get only read access to the records, not edit or delete. So this is view all data, and similar to view all data, we have modify all data permission. Where is it? Here. So if you enable modify all data permission, then user with this profile can read, edit, delete, and transfer ownership of all the records of all the objects within the organization, which means user can read, edit, delete, and transfer ownership of all the account records, read, edit, delete, and transfer ownership of all the records of contact object, opportunity, all the custom objects. So user can basically update all the data within Salesforce if modify all data permission is enabled. So again, these two permissions are very crucial. So you cannot just enable it for any profile. A lot of thought process need to be there to enable such important permissions. Okay. So this is the overall idea about a profile and the permissions which we can manage under profile. Now what we will do is we will try to consider one real-time scenario where we have to set up security model from scratch, from beginning. For that, let's say one of the company, let's say XYZ company, they have recently got Salesforce for themselves, and now they want to set up a security model for their Salesforce org. In that case, what steps administrator has to follow? Those we are going to discuss. So initially when any company gets a new Salesforce instance for themselves, what Salesforce does is Salesforce by default will create only one user for a person who is going to work as a Salesforce administrator for XYZ company. So initially only a person who is Salesforce administrator will have access to the org, and then later on he has to create users for rest of the people and then set up the entire security model step by step. So being the administrator of a company, what steps he has to follow? So the first thing is he needs to have the entire company information. So we need to gather all the company information within which we need to understand what all departments are there within the company, then what all roles are there within the company, how the role hierarchy works within the company. Then he needs to have all the employees information, because for every employee we are supposed to create user, not for every employee but maybe for most of the employees of the XYZ company he has to create users. So all the employees who need access to Salesforce, those employees information need to be available, like the employee belongs to which department, what is the role of every employee, that all information should be there. Once he has that knowledge base or information available with him, then he can plan accordingly and have further steps. So second step is related to licensing. We need user licenses as well, right? When we create user. So obviously we will be getting lots of user licenses as a package along with the Salesforce product license. So some decision need to be made, like which license to use and all. So that decision need to be made. Most of the times, as I mentioned earlier also, we end up using Salesforce license only for 80 to 90% of the internal users. For external users, we have knowledge only user license and other types as well. But almost for 80 to 90% of the users, Salesforce license is assigned. So here no major work is required. Okay. Just some initial analysis can be done and then we can move on with the next step. Next step is creating profiles. So if we have decided to use Salesforce license, then most of the profiles should have Salesforce license associated with them. So while creating new profiles, you need to keep that in mind, which license we are supposed to utilize for creating users. Okay. After creating profiles, then we need to create roles. But this can be optional initially, because while creating user, it is not mandatory to select role for a user. Okay. And we also have lots of standard roles already exist within Salesforce. So this step can be carried out later on also. It's not that important initially. And then last step is creating users. After creating users, then we will have to set up sharing settings. Now, the decision on how many profiles we need to create. How can we decide on that? So for that, we will discuss in detail because it's important. So let's consider XYZ company has three departments. Okay, sales department, marketing department, and support department. Okay. Every department has their own specific work, and accordingly they will need access to certain data within Salesforce. So let's say sales department need access to account, contact, and opportunity. Marketing department need access to maybe leads and campaigns, and support department may need access to case and solution. So you can clearly see here, based on the department, the access to data varies, the needs of data access vary. So this is where we can clearly make a decision that for every department we need a profile. Okay. So for sales department, we can create sales department profile, and we can enable permissions for account, contact, and opportunity. Again, for every object, which permission to enable, read, create, edit, delete, that again depends on the granular details we have collected from the business. Then similarly for marketing department, we need to create marketing department profile, and we need to enable access to lead and campaign object. Similar way for support department, we need to enable permission on case and solution object. Okay. So this is how we can make decisions on creating profiles. Then every department will have employees. Let's say sales department has employee E1 and E2. Similar way, marketing department has two employees E3, E4, and support department has two employees E5, E6. So once we create profile for every employee, at the end we can create user. So for employee E1, we can create U1, and we can assign sales department profile to a user. Similar way, for employee E2 also, we can create user U2, and the same profile can be assigned to. Same exercise for other departments as well. Yeah. Okay. So this is how we can set up complete security model from scratch. As of now, we have discussed only how to create users. In the next session, I think we will discuss how to create profiles. I hope now you must have got a bit of understanding on how exactly to set up security settings step by step. We will try to follow those steps and set up few security settings in the next session.